Hey guys, so today we're going to do a PC buying guide with parts you can actually find. That's going to mean no crazy out of stock GPUs or CPUs. I'm going to give you suggestions on things that you can actually buy today. So let's get started. Hey guys, Tiago with Classical Technology here. Thank you for joining me for another video. So today, let's do a PC buying guide. Now, I know it's been frustrating for everybody, not only not being able to get GPUs, CPUs, especially the newer ones from AMD, have been pretty much perpetually out of stock as well. If you're one of the lucky few that were able to actually buy one of the new GPUs or the CPUs, consider yourself lucky, because even though it may have seemed easy to you, a lot of people out there still just simply cannot get their hands on these new hardware products. So even though they can't get the hardware, it doesn't mean that they just want to give up and not build a PC at all, especially going into the end of the year, the holiday season now, with huge games like Cyberpunk 2077 coming out. Everybody wants to have a gaming PC. They want to use it with people staying home more. So there's no sense in telling them just wait until next year, because people want to take advantage of what they can now. That's why I want to go over some parts that you can actually buy today. And one thing that you have to remember, of course, it's not going to be the best and most optimized price to performance ratio, because everything's sold out, everything's more expensive. You're dealing with scalpers if you want to get the much newer hardware. So keep that in mind. Of course, getting a little bit older hardware, it's not ideal, like picking up the newest GPU at MSRP or the newest CPU if you can find it. That's definitely going to be the best case scenario. But given the fact that many people will not be able to do that, they can't get stuff at MSRP, they can't even find things that they want, this is going to have to be the second best option. And of course, you're going to have to make some compromises with a little bit older hardware, but it doesn't mean that you still can't get pretty great performance and not have to spend a huge amount of money. So the first thing that we're going to tackle will be CPUs. Of course, everybody's going to want the new Ryzen 5000 CPUs, especially the 5600X, all the way up to the 5950X. Now, the 5900 and the 5950X are much more difficult to find. Now, the 5600X and 5800X, if you're lucky enough to live near a micro center, they have been getting them in stock occasionally here and there. I was in the other day and they had over 25 5800X, but in general, people don't live near a micro center and they're not really able to find them online, so we're not even going to really talk about them. We're going to talk about some CPU options that you can actually buy. Now, if you can't get the newest Ryzen CPUs and you want AMD, you really don't have too many options here. What's been happening is the Ryzen 3000 series has once again crept up in price. You would think when there's a new release, the old stuff is going to be discounted, it's going to be a lot cheaper. The prices that I'm seeing now for Ryzen 3000 are the highest prices that I've pretty much seen all year. For example, the Ryzen 3900X, I've seen it on sale throughout the year before Ryzen 5000, being sold for as low as around $399. Now, if I look online and even somewhere like Micro Center that typically does have great CPU prices, they do have the 3900X in stock, but it's a whopping $529. That's pretty much more expensive than a 5800X and very close to the price of the 5900X. The 5900X MSRP is for $550. So you're talking about a $20 difference. And of course, this really isn't a normal scenario. The main reason is because there's just not stock of the new stuff. So that means everybody's buying up the old stuff. So even though it's unfortunate, it's not the best price to performance. It almost feels like a ripoff paying that much for hardware that used to be for actually a long time considerably cheaper. It's really the only option there. So that a 3900X for $529, don't get that. That's just really a really big ripoff. There are a couple of other Ryzen CPUs that actually may make a little more sense. For example, the 3800 XT is one of the newer Ryzen processors that will have a little bit better gaming performance. In fact, you could even say from Ryzen 3000, it's probably the one that's going to perform the best, and that one you can still get for under $400. You can find it usually between $360 to like $390 or so, and while it's not going to be as fast as the new Ryzen 5000, it will perform actually pretty good in gaming for the most part. It's still going to be 8-core, 16-thread, so you're getting a lot of great multi-threaded performance, and you're going to be able to put it on the same motherboard that in the future, if you do decide to upgrade to a Ryzen 5000 when they are readily available, you'll be able to easily do that without having to switch out your chipset. So actually, this CPU is still very high performing, and considering you can't get any of the other newer parts, it certainly does make a lot more sense. Now, if the 5600X was in stock or even the 5800X, of course, it would make sense to jump to the new newer system, but as we have seen, that's really not going to be a very easy possibility. So my first choice would be the 3800 XT. A second choice, if you do want to step down a little bit, the 3700X does seem to be selling for a little bit closer to $300, maybe $300 to $350. So it's going to come in a little bit cheaper than the 3800 XT, and it's still going to be 8-core, 16-thread, but of course it's going to clock a little bit lower, so it's not going to be as good for gaming. And if you compare it to something like a 5600X, even though it will outperform it in some cases where multi-threaded applications are in use, in terms of gaming, the architecture of the previous generation Ryzen just is not fast enough as it is with the Ryzen 5600X. So of course you're not going to be getting anywhere near sort of the single core speeds and the gaming performance, the better IPC, lower latency, but 3700X is still a very potent CPU, and it's going to be able to play most things without too many issues. And considering you may not necessarily be pairing a 3700X with something like a 3080 because of availability, you're actually probably not going to run into too many bottlenecking issues unless you're trying to play a 1080p or something like that. And if you are, that's where Intel still is out there. Like, you guys can't forget Intel. Even though they've really taken a beating in the CPU market, it's gotten a little bit funny because Intel now is actually sort of the bargain option in a lot of cases. I've seen the 9900K anywhere from $299 to around $360, and that's still a very high clocking 8-core 16-thread CPU. Not to mention you can get a Z390 motherboard for fairly cheap. So that's a processor that actually would give you great gaming performance, and you're not really going to be breaking the bank. In fact, it's probably going to outperform something like a 3700X for a similar or a little bit cheaper price. And of course, you're going to be on the Intel platform, specifically on Z390, so you're not really going to have much of an upgrade path later on. You're going to have to get a whole new motherboard, but considering the cost and considering the scarcity of all of the other CPUs, something like that actually is not that bad of a price. Same thing with the 9700K. 9700K, I've seen anywhere from $199 to around $250. Certainly a very good price because it used to be considerably more expensive. Now, the big difference between this and the 9900K, of course, it's not going to have the hyper threading, so it's just going to be 8-core, but it clocks pretty much just as high as the 9900K, just because it was the one most likely not to give you any bottlenecks, and the gaming performance is actually really impressive. It's going to be just as good as a lot of the newer stuff for considerably cheaper. And of course, if you still want Intel, you do have a few 10th generation options. They may be a little more expensive, like if you can find a 10600K or a 10700K, you may find them somewhere in the $300 range, and you are going to have to get a Z490 motherboard. Those CPUs, in terms of gaming, are certainly going to perform to a very, very high level. They're not going to be maybe quite as fast as like the AMD 5900X or something like that, but they're going to outperform a lot of older CPUs, pretty much all of the Ryzen 3000 CPUs when it comes specifically to gaming, and they're going to be available and in stock. That's certainly going to be the biggest point. All of these Intel CPUs seem to be pretty readily available, even something like the 10850K if you want really high performance and not necessarily have to pay the price of a 10900K. They certainly have been going down in price a good deal. I saw the 10800K for like $399 to around $450, which for a 10-core, 20-thread CPU that can clock pretty much all the way to 5.3 gigahertz, certainly very impressive. And considering that it's in stock, I don't think you would be compromising on any type of gaming performance. The only downside is that it's technically not the new AMD stuff. You're pretty much going to be getting fantastic gaming performance. So don't forget to take a look at these Intel CPUs. So, having covered the CPUs, our next big and perhaps the most difficult item will be the GPUs. Now, these have been even harder to find than all of the CPUs, and anything from nvidia, the RTX 3000 series, and AMD's RX 6000 series GPU are very, very difficult to find. You're going to have to get very creative and go on the secondhand market, most likely for 20 series GPUs. These are still going to give you ray tracing performance in a lot of cases. They're still going to give you great performance, but you're going to have to be careful here because 20 series GPU prices also went up definitely a good amount, much like the Ryzen 3000 CPUs. So I think you're going to have to go. Maybe you're going to have to find somebody that maybe they had a 2060 or a 2060 Super. Maybe they were able to get their hands on a 3060 Ti or a 3070. They've upgraded. Now, you want to avoid previous generation GPUs that people are charging a really big premium for, because in the future, they're really not going to be worth that. It's going to go down as soon as stock is available of the new stuff. But you can certainly find individuals, if you really look hard enough in your local marketplace on eBay, that are going to be, just from their own personal GPU use. They're not a scalper. They don't care to profit. They just want to get rid of that hardware. Maybe they were able to get something else, like I mentioned before. So that's really going to be your best bet. So let's say if you can get, a 2070, even a 2080, which wasn't the most popular GPU of last generation, maybe you can get it for what's a pretty fair market price. And then in a few months or next year, when new stuff is in stock, then you can go ahead, sell that GPU. There's always going to be somebody interested in a GPU like that, especially from the 20 series. And you may lose a few bucks here and there, but you'll have gotten to use that GPU for a fairly long time, for months and months. So even if you lose 50 or 100 bucks, I don't think you're going to lose a tremendous amount, judging by how in demand these GPUs are. But being previous generation, when the new stuff comes in, you can definitely expect not to get exactly what you paid for it, but that's fair. You're going to get your use out of it, and that's going to be the best bang for your buck, where a 2080 still performs really, really well. In fact, close to whatever a 3060 Ti is. So it's not like you're getting absolutely crap performance, and you're not going to be spending a boatload. But remember, just avoid the people that are selling their previous generation GPUs at a really huge markup. You can find people that just want to sell it at a fair price, just want to sell it to upgrade to something else, or maybe they don't need it anymore. Those are going to be really your best options. And even though not everybody's still going to be able to find an option like that, it's still going to be a little easier than trying to find a new in stock GPU. And of course, at the same time, you can still continue your search for a new GPU. They have been restocking on occasion, so if you put in the work and you really, really look consistently, you know the different avenues. I've posted various videos on how people were able to get these GPUs, like the EVGA Q system. You can check if you have a local micro center, check Newegg, check on Best Buy. They've been restocking the RTX GPUs pretty much on occasion. Not always, but maybe every week there'll be like a day that they drop a bunch of stock. I've seen it before in various cases, so it's not impossible, but understandably, not everybody's going to be able to get that. That's why I mentioned your second best option is going to be a fairly priced previous generation GPU. All right, guys, so I hope this video helped you guys. I wanted to make a more realistic build video, sort of the two main components, the GPU and CPU. I didn't mention the other stuff because that stuff is all readily available. You can still find motherboards and power supplies and cases. CPU and GPU certainly of primary importance. Let me know if you guys have any questions, and let me know if you were able to get lucky and whatever you're able to find, even from this generation or previous generation. Smash that like button, remember to subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next video.